This is the Savvy Investor radio show and podcast. For help with your retirement, schedule a 15-minute phone conversation with the team at ProStatus Financial Advisors today. Just call 866-597-1040 and at thesavvyinvestorradio.com.
Welcome back to the Savvy Investor Radio Show and podcast with the team at ProStatus Financial. Mike Kinnett is here. Lawrence Kiley is here as we talk through some of the issues of retirement. And I saw this headline and I heard the president talk and I thought, I got to look into this one. President Trump says he likes the way Australia does their retirement savings. So I dove in there and found a couple of interesting little differences. But Mike, I wanted to throw this because this is the big difference here. And I wanted to get your opinion on it. Here in the United States, as we all know, we put money in a 401k, and that money is called tax deferred. You don't pay tax on it until you take it in retirement. And then Mike tells us about RMDs and all the difficulties that we have with taxes in retirement. Well, in Australia, you put the money into what there would be, I'll do air quotes, 401k, and you get taxed every year on that money, 15%. But then when you get into retirement, there are no taxes at all. You can take it out as much as you want, when you want, inheriting, all of that. So, Mike, tell me, are we better off using a tax-deferred system or something like what Australia is doing? What do you see?
And who's that guy, Paul Harvey? Do you remember Paul Harvey?
Yeah, the rest of the story, yeah.
And here's the rest of the story, right? Here's the rest of the story.
Okay.
Because, the concept of putting money into the 401k, it's been indoctrinated into us, right? We've been doing it for basically since the early 70s when corporate America decided to transfer the risk of your own retirement from defined benefit, which is the old pensions, to the defined contributions, which are basically 401ks. And so, for the last 50, 60 years, we've been responsible for saving for our own retirement. And initially it was designed, like you just said, you put money in, you get a tax deduction, and you invest in basically mutual funds, and it grows and does whatever it does. And then, and you have a silent partner. The IRS wants their 1/3 of your money. It used to be at 70, now it's at 73, and so it'll be at 75. But at some point, you're forced to take money out. And when you are forced to take money out, it's called a required minimum distribution. It's around 3.5%, 4%. It gets a little bit higher percentage every year. And then what happens is that money comes out, it's added to your income for tax purposes. And then typically when you take the RMD, it forces your Social Security to be taxable. And when your Social Security all of a sudden becomes taxable, it forces your capital gains to be taxable. And when your capital gains are taxable and your Social Security is taxable, the RMD is taxable. And that's why Donald Trump said, hey, maybe we have a better way. Okay, so now, fast forward to, and here's the rest of the story. Donald Trump's absolutely right. I wish we could adopt the Australian version of a 401k, but wait, not only do you get a solution to that problem, we get Ginsu knives today. Today we get Ginsu knives because we have a better system in place than Australia has already. It's called the Roth 401k.
Okay.
Right? So in the Australian program, you put the money in, and every year you get 15%, you tax 15% on the growth, you pay tax on your income, and you pay tax 15% on the growth on the Australian 401k. What happens if you pay ordinary income tax, just like we talked about, just like with in Australia, you pay income tax on your income, and then when you put it into the Roth, you never pay tax on it again, ever. Okay, so I'm waiting for the chirps. Ever. So in Australia, we can pay tax on the growth at 15% every year. Or in America, we can put it into the Roth 401k and pay zero tax on it after we make that initial contribution, ever. And did I mention ever? Right? So that's an important factor of it. So now we pay tax once on it. So we pay, I always like to equate it to an apple tree, right? So you have a choice as a farmer and you want to plant an apple orchard. You have a choice when you go to the apple seed store and he's selling you that apple seed. You can pay tax on the seed today and never pay tax on one apple that comes off your harvest, or don't pay tax on that seed today, but every time an apple comes off that tree, it doesn't matter if it's rotten, doesn't matter if you eat it, doesn't matter if you sell it, doesn't matter if somebody steals it, you pay tax on every single apple. Well, our approach here is probably let's pay tax on that seed, which is kind of what Donald Trump wants us to do when he's making that analogy to the Australian program. I think he just didn't read the second chapter of my book that talks about Roth 401ks, because to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, think about all the attributes and all the benefits of a Roth 401k, especially when you retire.
Yeah, I mean, I tell clients all the time that's the first step in kind of our tax recommendation is, or I ask them first, are you contributing to the Roth side of your 401k? And I would say about 80% of the time they're not doing that, and that's the first recommendation is switch those contributions over from pre-tax to Roth because it's going to make a huge difference in the long term. And
let's just interject because we're going to get radio listeners that send us comments that, well, but then you pay tax on it, puts you in a higher tax bracket. That is a true statement, but that's why the planning part comes into play, which is what you were saying, as part of the plan. So yes, we need to take into account your tax rates today and what your tax rates are going to be in the future. We need to look at those things. I agree.
Right, exactly. Because we're then going to take that next step to where we show you on paper and in the spreadsheet the difference between actually doing tax planning and converting to Roth or contributing to Roth versus not doing anything and remaining in that pre-tax bucket for retirement. And we'll show you on paper, the savings could be drastic. You could save, upwards of $1 million to $2 million in taxes over your lifetime just by making those Roth contributions and then having a strategic Roth conversion plan. And then not only are you saving for your lifetime, but then we're saving the taxes for the kids when they inherit the money. So it is really a two-step and legacy plan that we're creating. But that first step is really what Mike alleviated to was make those contributions to that Roth 401k side of things.
Let me ask one question about this, because one of the things that I saw in this that I wondered about is this. If you tax people at 15% along the way, doesn't that fund the program along the way and keep the program solvent? And I thought that seems like a good idea, getting their taxes along the way. In our government, we get the taxes in RMDs and in inheritance. The government has to wait for that money. That's why they keep tinkering with all of these rules so they can get their money a little bit sooner. Do you see that as an advantage for the Australian government and keeping the program funded?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, all governments want more tax dollars, right? Because they're such good stewards with their money and they make such wise choices. I don't follow the Australian government's spending habits, but, and I'm an equal opportunity basher. When the Democrats are in control, they spend like drunken sailors and the Republicans piss and moan. And when the Republicans are in control, they spend like drunken sailors and the Democrats piss and moan. Either way, they're bad stewards with our money. So yes, you can take that approach that let's go ahead and figure out a way to fund the government with my tax dollars every year. Or I can figure out a way to fund them a little bit and never fund them again, right? To me, I never want to fund them again because if they never have another study on a shrimp on a treadmill and they never build another bridge to the middle of nowhere. And my brother-in-law, it was crazy. My brother-in-law was a defense contractor. And, the story has kind of changed over the years, but my recollection is they had to build a laptop that would withstand, and I'm making this up, a 10 megatron nuclear bomb, some sort of incredible explosion on the surface of the earth. Okay. And they built this laptop and it was like a $3 million laptop. And this was 20 years ago. So it was like a $3 million laptop. And the way they tested it is they put it like on a pillar of some sort, and they took if my memory is correct, they took two 20,000-pound lead balls, put them up at 90 degrees, and let them swing at the same time and hit the computer. And that was supposed to represent the percussion or whatever it would be, the explosion. And the computer had to turn on. And they built it for $3 million, and that damn thing turned on. And my brother-in-law was like, yeah, it turns on. We didn't really want to spend a whole lot of time asking them the question about, okay, so this nuclear explosion's gone off. The computer's lying on the ground because it survived. What moron is still alive walking around on the surface of the earth that's going to go over, find this computer and turn it on? And because it's been probably a week or two before all the dust settles that they can find it, where's the power coming from to turn the damn thing on? Where are the satellites that it's going to talk to? But yeah, we could build that damn thing, and damn it, they built it. So yes, I think we have a choice. We can contribute to that type of stewardship of our money. And we all agree that there's great things that the government spends money on, but I don't think anybody can argue that there's really stupid things. Now, maybe we don't always agree on what the stupid things are, but the Roth is always going to be a better solution from my perspective than the traditional 401k. And I hear all the time, and Lawrence, you probably get this too, we're going to be in a lesser tax bracket when we retire. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
All the time I hear that. That's the biggest concern is, lesser tax bracket, and I show them on paper, and we can show them in an illustration. We can show, yes, you will be in a lesser tax bracket for the first few years of retirement, and then, as Mike again alluded to, then RMDs hit, and that completely switches, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse the older you get. So we show them, again, we show you the raw numbers on the difference of looking at the upfront taxes now and then being a lower tax bracket later on and for a longer period of time, and the savings that actually ends up having to you, or that you get from actually switching. Basically what we're doing is reversing the tax situation, right? Making you pay more upfront now, so you have to pay less or zero later, versus, a few years of being in a lower tax bracket and then that completely switching and having this huge, tax bomb hitting you once RMDs start up.
And I'd even make the argument that anybody who says, I'm going to be in a lesser tax bracket when I retire, my question is always why? Why would you want to be? Why do you think you're going to be in a lesser tax bracket? Because when you get to retirement, the fact is that with the exception if you happen to pay off your house before you retire, what's going to change? I mean, your honey-do list, your bucket list, and your round to it list are going to expand your income needs. When you retire, you're going to be so busy doing things that you didn't have time to do when you were still working. You're going to be surprised you got anything done in the first place, right? I mean, unless you're the guy that's going to go sit in front of the TV and die in 5 years, in which case, I don't mean to be rude, who cares? You don't need tax plan, you don't need a plan, just spend your money for 5 years and then die and get it over with. But most people are going to be out enjoying their retirement. And when you're out enjoying your retirement, that costs money. So I have yet to meet a person, at least in our practice, and maybe that's absolute, but in general, people don't spend less money. As a matter of fact, they spend more because of the honey-do list, the round to it list, the bucket list. And in the first 5 to 7 years, we see just an escalation of costs, right? And so, somewhere around 60, 65 when people retire, and their income needs increase till somewhere around 72 to 75, and between 72 and 75, somewhere around there to maybe 82 to 85, their needs kind of decline, because somewhere around 75, nap time and making it to the bathroom become an important part of your day. And then somewhere between 82 and 85, they actually start going back up again. Admittedly, they start going back up again because of healthcare costs, right? So to go into retirement planning that I'm going to need less money, that's a silly way to go into it. You should go into retirement planning thinking, if I can control my taxes, that's less risk I need to take in order to create the returns that I need to accomplish my goals. Because if I'm not losing 20 to 30% to taxes every single year, that's less returns, right? So if you need a 6% return to actually retire, because you're losing 2 to 3% of that return to taxes, you actually need 8 or 9%. The risk associated with getting 8 to 9% is a lot different than a 6% return risk, right? Because 6% is much easier to get. And if you're not paying taxes on that 6% return, well, that's all you need is 6%. So absolutely, as much as I like the idea of the Australian plan, as much as I might like the idea that Donald Trump brought it up as a concept, we need to revert back and listen back to Paul Harvey for the second part of the story. And the second part of the story is we have a better plan in place. Use the Roth 401k today.
Anytime that they compare our tax system to another tax system in another country, I always say, do you think Congress is going to give up their power with that 100,000 pages that they have put together to give up that power on our tax system? Probably not. So that's one thing about having a financial advisor and the team at ProStatus on your side is as these rules change, you can be notified and change with them. This is the Savvy Investor radio show and podcast. And to find out more about the team, go to the website, which is thesavvyinvestorradio.com. If you take a look at our podcast there, you'll also see some of the notes and the links to get in touch to start talking about your retirement. Again, thesavvyinvestorradio.com. We thank you so much for listening. We'll be here next week, and we hope you will be too.
Advisory services offered through ProStatus Financial Advisors Group, a registered investment advisor. Insurance licensed in Maryland. ProStatus Financial Advisors Group, LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if ProStatus Financial Advisors Group is licensed in your state, please call 410-863-1040. ProStatus Group, LLC is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through representatives of ProStatus Financial Advisors Group.